lots of swell, but it was the middle of the night and the wind shifts and we get the order that the inner jib needs to come down and needs to be stowed. And I'm looking at my watch mates and going, okay, that's us. We're doing this. It's now. And we step out from the shelter of the bridge and it's howling wind. We can't even hear each other, let alone see each other. And obviously we're climbing over things and clipping in wherever we can. And we get out onto the bowsprit and the sail comes down. And obviously the wind takes it as it comes down and it drops the whole thing into the water off of the bowsprit net. And it's just a massive drogue. We're going 9 knots and it's just full of water. And I remember wrestling this sail. I don't even know what's happening either side of me. I don't know if my bowsprit mates have fallen off the bowsprit at this point, but I'm holding onto the sail as much as possible. It keeps filling up with water and slipping out of our grasp. We're out there for Jesus knows how long, just trying to get this on the bowsprit and tied down, lashed down.
It sounds like you had quite an extraordinary time, Em, on your last traineeship.
It was a lot. It was challenging, but not enough to put me off, apparently, because here I am.
Here you are. Well, seeing as you're here, you may as well introduce yourself.
I'm Emily, and I'm the trainee. I grew up sailing on a lake, a very small dinghy. Both my parents were sailors, traditional sailors. My mom worked on Thames sailing barges, and that's actually how she met my dad in the UK, who was the lighterman, waterman, pilot, and disco boat skipper, and that sort of stuff. You can say it's in my blood. I actually started on traditional sailboats as part of my educational path. I was on Class Afloat years ago, which is a tall ship, and I sailed on her for 9 months while doing sort of my first year university, and that set the ball rolling in my kind of love of traditional sailing.
And as always, I am Jess, the first mate.
And I am Hannah, the bosun.
And here we are. We have left Malden, where we picked up Emily. You were covered in mud, Em, when we picked you up.
I mean,
mucky pup.
Malden, famously full of mud.
Filthy. Well, it's actually your watch now, Em, seeing as we're here. So
yeah,
make yourself a cup of tea and you better get up on deck. The skipper's up there somewhere. We'll put you on the helm or something.
Right.
Watch out for wind turbines. There's wind farms around here.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Oh, and at some point, if you have time, you could bring me a beer. That'd be good.
In a wine glass?
Perfect. Yeah, alcohol-free, obviously.
Oh, yeah, of course. Jess doesn't drink.
What's your poison, Hannah?
I'll just have a neat rum when you have a moment.
Classy ladies. I'm on it.
Have a good watch.
See ya.
Hi, Jess.
Hello.
Fancy seeing you here.
Yes, another watch over and done with, thank goodness. And it's finally the turn of our new trainee.
Yeah.
Time for them to do some proper work.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're up there on their own, helming in the middle of the night.
Yeah, skipper's around somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's finally time for our off-watch hour.
Yeah.
Instead of getting sleep or eating or doing anything useful like that, we'll talk to you, dear listeners.
Where are we, Jess?
I think we're in the North Sea.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's bleak.
Yeah.
Offshore wind farm.
Yeah, just dodging at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, that trainee is either terrible at helming or is actually doing a fantastic job of slaloming around the old wind farm.
Yeah.
So the theme of today's show is based all around traineeships and whether or not this is a really good way into the life of a traditional sailor. Hannah and I have both gone through a traineeship from National Historic Ships UK, which was called Shipshape Heritage Training Partnership, SHTP2.
Yeah.
2 very different experiences.
Yes. Well, you had COVID. You didn't have COVID, but you had COVID.
The entire time.
The entire time.
Yes.
Whereas I didn't. And certainly there were differences in it.
And while we were in Malden, we managed to get enough signal to have a Zoom catch-up with our friends Misha and Sean. They'll be popping in and out of the conversation today, but they may as well introduce themselves now.
I'm Sean, and I was an SHTP2 museum shipkeeping trainee. I'm Micheline Payne. I was in the SHTP2 program. I am a Bermudian and I studied archaeology for my bachelor's, and then I went on to conservation, with always a focus on maritime conservation.
Also, we had a chat with Adrian Ragbourne, who's the CEO of Seize Your Future. They manage Pelican of London and they do some fantastic work with their trainees. So we'll have a chat with Adrian later as well.
Jess and I went down the road of being on the Ship Shape Heritage Training Partnership.
Yep.
Or SHTP2.
Yes, they ran SHTP1 like in 2013, I think.
Yeah, it was a bit before, and then they got the funding again, I think.
It was a bit different as well, I think
it was.
Yeah.
I remember meeting a guy called Gabriel who'd been on it, and he'd had a good time on it, actually. He did some Thames Barges stuff, and then I worked with him on Eye of the Wind.
Yeah, I know Gabe.
Oh, well then why the hell am I telling you for?
Well, I don't know him very well, but he was relief skipper for Agnes 2001. Yeah.
Were you sailing in 2001?
Yep. That was the year I sailed everything.
Oh.
And I was on Irene in the Scillies, and Agnes anchored not far away from us, and Olga weren't far away from us, and we sort of had lots of pilot cutter visitors all in the same day.
Nice.
And Gabriel came aboard. That's Gabriel.
Yeah.
Hi, Gabe.
Yeah, hi Gabe, yeah. Yeah, no, we had a good fun time on Eye of the Wind. But we're not here to talk about Gabriel. We're here to talk about the SHTP2 project.
What was your experience, Hannah? What was your experience as a trainee? Where did you come from?
Where did I come from? Well, basically, I was very, very fortunate that I was able to sail my great uncle's boat on the Easter holidays, join them in Portsmouth, and we'd go up and down the Solent.
Oh, wow.
It was lovely, yeah. And then I found out about tall ships, and that opened up a whole other thing.
Yeah, as it does.
As it does, kind of an obsession, really got into it. My first tall ship experience was sailing on the topsail schooner Oosterschelde, or Oosterschelde, that's the Dutch, let's say, from... Sorry about editing for that one. Sounds
It's okay.
It went straight
red
for it.
lines.
Red lines. So that was from just off Madagascar to Australia, part of my gap year. Saved up all my pennies to do that. And then I managed to do some volunteering on the Eye of the Wind.
Right.
So I kind of got into it like that. And I was working at a museum when I came across an ad for the SHTP2 thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Facebook cookies really worked for me then. I've never known them do such a good job.
I worked at the Glen Lee as kind of front of the house. Ships just kind of grab you and then you can't get back out ever again. It was a work colleague at the time just mentioned the National Historic Ships SHTP2. I didn't think I would get anywhere near it because, of course, just a little wee Fife boy from the middle of nowhere. And then I went to Oban for the selection day. Going up to Oban, which is one of the most beautiful spots in Scotland, and then sailing about on a rickety old wooden trawler, going from that to then getting off the train in Portsmouth, coming around the corner, and the first thing you see is Warrior. Just if before the traineeship I wasn't too sure about my future with historic ships, I certainly was positive about it afterwards.
So there were two strands.
Yeah.
You were able to choose whether you wanted to be a musician. Go down the shanty route.
I chose the harp.
No, cello for me. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
So there were two routes. There was the museum shipkeeping route, which is what I was on, and there was the seafaring route, which is what Jess was on.
Yeah, you were the year before me.
I was, yeah. And I'm going to sneeze.
All the dust on that cello.
Yeah, all the dust on that cello. In the maritime heritage world, there are almost two camps of how you look after a traditional vessel. One is that you keep sailing them, you make replicas perhaps, and you ensure that the skills are still there, like the traditional sailing skills.
Yeah.
And you maybe use the ships as they once were used, like fishing or transport or whatever, but you also ensure that people can enjoy them through charters. My area of interest when I first got into it was museums, because that's another way you can look after these vessels.
Yeah.
Not necessarily bringing them out of the water. That's quite a contentious thing.
Yeah. But the preservation of material.
Exactly. It's understanding that the material itself is the historic object rather than the lines of the vessel or the rig, or...
Yeah.
We can get into that.
And we will.
And we will. So I wanted to go into the museum side of things. I love a museum, me.
We know.
Yeah.
I remember you speaking so excitedly in the last episode about the SS Great Britain and the old Brunel Museum.
Love a maritime museum. I was so excited when I got told that because you had to put your top placements down, because part of the traineeship is placement.
Yeah.
My top placement was NMRN, so the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth, where HMS Victory, Nelson's flagship, as everyone no doubt knows, is kept. I put that down and I ended up going to the wrong interview.
Did you?
I misread the thing.
Oh
I
my
thought
God.
it said NMM, which is the National Maritime Museum, which is Greenwich and Cutty Sark. And instead it was NMRN. And I found out literally 10 minutes before my interview. Was like, oh, fuck this. I've absolutely scuppered it. I've prepared completely for the wrong place. And I went in and just had a really, really great, frank discussion with one of the shipwrights from NMRN about, exactly what I just talked about, actually. You know, whether you preserve the object or the material or what you're doing when you're looking after a vessel like that.
Yes.
Anyway, so I had a great chat with him and I ended up working with him when I was working with the shipwrights. But I digress.
I can't remember how I found out about it. I think I was doing temp work at the time. I was working at a financial advisory firm doing their reception. And I would just kind of spend a lot of my free time at the job trying to find something in conservation or something so I could actually do what I had studied. And I came across this traineeship and I was like, oh, this could work. This could be perfect. And so I signed up to it. I didn't really think it was going to come to anything, but then it did. So that was quite exciting.
Wait. No, sorry. Before we get into this, like, how did your interview go then?
Oh, it was good.
But who did you interview with? How did you work that out?
I was being interviewed, God, I can't remember. Wasn't there someone from National Historic Ships there? And then it was a representative from NMRN. He was such a kind man and he was part of the shipwright team.
But, like, was the Maritime Museum expecting you? Were they one of the partners or?
No, sorry, it was
Okay.
the National Maritime, the Cutty Sark.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, they weren't. No, it was just me. NMRN were expecting me.
And you thought it was for Cutty Sark?
Yeah.
Right.
So I was kind of gutted. So I was like, oh, I'm not, it'd be really nice to get on this. But obviously I really wanted to go to Portsmouth.
You were like, oh, it'd be great if I could get onto the Cutty Sark.
Yeah.
Well, we don't own the Cutty Sarks.
No. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you've got the wrong museum, wrong huge maritime heritage museum.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you ended up at the museum you actually wanted to be in.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And I love NMRN very, very deeply. Because I remember going onto Victory when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And Dad taking me around Victory, and I was so excited, Jess. It absolutely was a fundamental part of my passion for this subject. So the fact that I could even work there was just beyond belief.
Yeah. No, I had a similar experience as a kid on a school trip on the way to the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
We stopped into NMRM on the way because we were early for the ferry. So I saw Victory and I was well into like pirate ships and any kind of tall ships at a really young age. And so, like, seeing Victory, of all things, just, like, on a random day when you're on your way somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a photo of me as a kid stood outside of Victory.
Yes.
And then when I got to recreate that on my first day of the traineeship as well, which we'll talk about because mine didn't quite go to plan.
It didn't, but it started at Portsmouth where mine ended.
It did.
On the same day.
Which I think is a bit intense, really. Like, could we have jumped in your graves any quicker?
Bye.
Quick turnaround, that.
Yeah. Lottery funding waits for no man. It is quite an inspirational vessel, it really is. And I was able to do some work on it.
Did you get to see the witness marks as you were crawling around the bilges of Victory?
The marks on the timbers?
Yeah, from the boat builders throughout the years.
Yeah, we did, yeah. It's interesting because not a lot of Victory is actually original, but there are definitely markings on the timber.
Yeah, but then we have the whole conversation then of, well, what needs to be original? Because these 100, 200, 300-year-old boats are Trigger's Broom.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, what?
Trigger's Broom.
Trigger's Broom?
Yeah. So Trigger from Only Fools and Horses had this broom. He'd replaced the handle 6 times and the brush like 12 times.
Right.
And he couldn't believe it was still going.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's not really the same broom anymore, is it? If you've replaced the handle and the brush so many times. And that's kind of what our traditional boats are, really.
Mm.
You replace all of the planks, but they're still the same boat.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I've got another example of that, but I'm going to dumb it down. You know, the not Girls Aloud. What are they called? The
Give us a clue.
Sugar Babes.
Oh, yeah, Sugar Babes.
Is that so they
Yes, they are Trigger's Broom also.
They're Trigger's Broom, yeah, because they
more members
than any other existing group.
Yeah.
Does that make them the Sugar Babes?
Yeah. So are we to say that Victory is one of the Sugar Babes?
Yeah.
Interesting.
My placement was with the Scottish Fisheries Museum in Anstruther. Lovely wee museum. That was a really nice 8 to 9 months I was there, as well as spending 2 weeks with Trinity, and then spend 2 weeks with Diana looking after Victory, and then with the historic ships team up in Warriors Transom. The false transom at the time, and there was this great debate about exactly how they were going to install it, and it was a fly on the wall with all the shipwrights were debating, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Anyway, you were saying about how your traineeship went. So what was the actual... Because obviously we had very different experiences.
Yeah. So it should have gone like this. We all started in Falmouth. There were 8 of us. 3 of us were doing museum shipkeeping. The rest were doing the seafarer section.
Mm-hmm.
We were living in Falmouth for a couple of weeks, and there we completed various different qualifications that we might not have got before. So a load of people that did powerboat, radio, first aid, things like that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we went on excursions and met different people in the industry to start with. So like we went to Working Sail, where you went
Eventually.
Yeah. With Luke eventually with Luke Powell at the pilot cutters. But Falmouth was great fun because it is, I was about to say we're here, but we're not. We're in the middle of the North Sea.
We're in the North Sea. We're definitely not in my living room in Penryn.
That's right. Yeah, not in Penryn, which is just next to Falmouth. But it's a great little town. If anyone hasn't been, it's lovely, and it's got a really, really deep maritime history.
And a great museum that you thought you were going to. No, you didn't.
No,
I don't know why I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah. Same shit, different boats.
That's it.
They have the small boat collection.
They
in Falmouth.
do.
The Falmouth trip was one of my favorite ones. I loved it. I want to go back there like now. It was great.
Then we'd head over to liner barge, and you guys experienced this too.
Yeah.
And, you know, in another episode, we'll be talking with Dom and Barbara, who run the liner barge, amongst other things.
Yeah.
And we've ended up doing a lot of work for them, and I'm actually a director for the liner barge CIC. So
it's been a long couple of years.
Yeah, a long couple of years. Started a good relationship there.
Yeah.
But when we went on board liner, it was just starting to be kitted out for charters. Nowadays, liner has bunks that manoeuvre down and charter guests sleep there, and the crew sleep in the forecastle. We were in hammocks.
In a cargo hold.
In the cargo hold, yeah. And it's a beautiful ship, stunning interior.
Yeah, she's fab.
And it's got a really big, lovely wooden table running along the keel in the middle.
Yeah.
And you all kind of gather around it. And the thing is that the sides are completely smooth.
Yeah, they
How to describe it?
The hull is very much like it goes from straight sides, then there's a round turn of the bilge, and then it's very flat bottomed, I suppose. It's very round on the inside, isn't it?
Yeah. So when a friend of mine, I watched this happen. A good friend, Janice, hi Janice, was in a hammock in front of me. I watched her struggle to get out of the hammock and she ended up falling onto the floor and sliding down into the middle of the ship because it was so slippery. It's just wood. That was so funny. Yeah, so we were rocking, in these hammocks and it was good fun. It felt quite like camping. We weren't on liner for long at all.
No.
We did small boat handling and dinghies and rowboats, all sorts. So that was a really nice introduction to traditional sailing in the Southwest, I suppose.
Yeah. Although not typical sailing in the Southwest.
No.
And as you'll find out in the liner episode.
Yeah. You can't sail
No,
liner.
sailing's a bit of an overstatement.
Yeah.
You sort of...
drift.
You sort of aim and...
and pray.
And pray. Aim and pray.
She's lovely. Such a welcoming little vessel.
Yeah.
From liner, we then headed over to Brixham. So we were just basically working our way up the southwest coast. And in Brixham, we stayed on the Trinity vessel. So Trinity was... Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but Jess, it was just so unfortunate for you.
Hilarious.
It's hilarious. Trinity was a charity that owned and operated 3 Brixham trawlers.
Yeah.
Which are a specific type of vessel in the southwest. Yeah. And the reason why I'm laughing, I suppose, is really unfair, but Jess was meant to go to them as a placement for the next year and they went into administration.
Despite Trinity Sailing Foundation being my host partner and the company I had interviewed with, I didn't ever actually get to go. Trinity unfortunately went into administration a couple of months before I was due to start the traineeship. So I did the first part of my traineeship, which was the 3 weeks in Falmouth, liner and Brixham.
Brixham, yeah.
Then I went off to IBTC, which you're about to talk about. And then, I just didn't have a host partner until the very last minute where Working Sail came on board and they managed to take me on.
Yeah.
Which was great because I was just in time to be the trainee deckhand on their brand new beautiful pilot cutter Pelu, which was about to be launched.
Gorgeous.
And I think I'd been at Working Sail for about 2 weeks when we finally put Pelu in the water, which was great. Until another 2 weeks went by and a little thing called COVID happened.
It was like a really big chunk of our whole experience that was just completely taken away. Definitely feel like I missed out. Just didn't get to go to the different departments that I would have liked to have spent time. Because I basically only worked with the shipwrights and the riggers and the conservators. But I also went to work with the curators. I went to work in the archives. I went to do so many other things that I didn't really get a chance to do. I feel like when I did come back eventually, I kind of split my time between everybody. So I was able to do a little bit of everything, but that's not as full of an experience as I would have liked.
Yeah, it wasn't great. But it was good in other ways. I mean, we didn't get to, obviously, as a seafaring trainee and not getting to do any seafaring, that's not ideal. But we did get to spend a lot more time as a group than I think your year did, because once you guys had gone off to your partnerships, like you'd gone off away from each other, apart from bits and pieces here and there, whereas we were catching up on Zoom probably once a week for various masterclasses with Tom Cunliffe and Toby Maris. We even did a sail cargo masterclass with a certain Hannah Herford.
Oh, you did?
Great. It gave me time to work on my day skipper theory and prepare for that. So it wasn't really the end of the world. And then we finally got to go back in the summer after an absolutely bizarre few months of just being at home. And
yeah, God.
I managed to take home some bits and pieces to do as projects. So I got to tie all of Pelu's sail ties, put eyes in the end of them, and
that's good.
Yeah, oiled and varnished all of the parrel beads and any small things I could take home and work on. I did that.
Yeah,
and then got to go back in the summer. Went out on Pelu's first sea trials. Did quite a lot of photo shoots for different magazines and stuff with her as well. So that was really nice. Just a lot of bashing back and forth in Falmouth Bay, really.
Yeah.
And we did a nice long sail to Foy with the shipwrights and anyone who'd been involved. All of the boat builders and their partners came. And it was lovely. We went to Foy, moored up alongside Bessie Ellen. There's a lovely photo of us alongside each other. And and then I ended up in hospital. After that trip, I had a massive hemiplegic migraine, which presented a lot like a stroke.
God,
so
terrifying.
I was nearly airlifted off Pelu on the way back.
I mean, that's a whole other exercise that a ship that's just gone into the water probably doesn't want to do anyway.
And it was equally embarrassing because obviously that had gone out on the radio. Joanna had to VHF out for the Coast Guard and make calls to Movidisi for us to come in an emergency and all that. So I was then getting text messages from people saying like, oh, I've just heard a call out on the radio. Is everyone all right on Pelu?
Yeah.
And I obviously couldn't get back to them and be like, yeah, it's me.
Yeah.
So that was great. So then I was off for another week or so with that. And then because of COVID and situations out of anybody's control, the goals of the traineeship weren't met. So National Historic Ships UK and National Lottery Heritage Fund agreed to extend my traineeship, which was crazy. So I'll talk about that in another episode.
Yeah.
And the benefits of being a jolly roaming sailor and not sticking to one boat, because I think experiencing as many rigs as you can in the shortest time as possible is great fun and everyone should do it. Anyway, you did get to go to Trinity, so tell us about that.
Yeah, we were on some of Trinity's vessels. We were staying on Provident, which is really cosy down below that. So lovely Brixham trawler. Mm-hmm. And there's a maritime museum in Brixham. We met local fishermen who know not only about current fishing industry and stuff, but also about the traditional fishing history coming out of Brixham.
Yeah.
So we learnt a lot there as well. Basically, it was just networking. We were constantly meeting people.
A big part of it is networking, and the biggest part is that the traineeship put me in places that I'd have to be really, really lucky to have gotten into without it, you know. Mel, the curator at the Dundee Heritage Trust, I knew her from the Fisheries Museum because she was assistant curator there, and Mel was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I would have my fag. Mel walked past and I just got chatting and I was like, oh my God, it's been like, at this point, 2 years. And then she mentioned, oh my God, well, this is funny because we're going to be hiring like a shipwright soon and this, that, the next thing. And I'm like, oh, that's a good like trad name. And then applied and ended up being ship crew supervisor, which is a much less cool title, but essentially bundled into that job. I tripped and bundled and then stood up and I'm like, oh, I'm here. It would never have happened without the traineeship.
After Brixham, we headed, bypassed everything else and went straight to IBTC. So that's the International Boatbuilding Training College in Lowestoft.
Yep.
If anyone's been to Lowestoft, you get it. I mean, there isn't much there.
I will say we loved Lowestoft. Everyone we spoke to at the beginning of our traineeship, when they'd ask, like, well, where are you going next? We'd say, oh, we're heading to Lowestoft. And they would take us to the side with a very solemn face. They would say, Lowestoft is a very depressed place. And so we were like, what on earth are we going to? And then we had an absolute riot in Lowestoft. We absolutely loved it. Honestly, like, some of the best days of my life were in Lowestoft.
That's great. You guys had a good one, I think.
Yeah.
We were, I don't know what was going on. We were just all a bit, we were staying in were you in a caravan park?
Some of them were. I wasn't. I had my shit sorted.
Oh.
And actually managed to get a house share in a very lovely neighbourhood called Beccles.
I didn't know that, Jess.
Yeah,
I'm kind of bitter about it, to be honest. I think my experience in Lowestoft would have been different if it wasn't winter in a
in the caravan.
in a caravan park.
Didn't you have a swimming pool though?
Yeah.
See.
Yeah, and a sauna.
I mean, we had a dog.
What kind of dog?
He was a Labrador called Winston.
Oh,
Winnie. And then, like, obviously, because he's a lovely boy, we had to come up with 1,000 other nicknames for him. So I called him Winnebago.
Sure.
Yeah, he's lovely boy. Anyway.
So the museum route meant that you stayed at IBTC for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Doing bits and bobs. Very practical work, and it was great. You know, it's good fun and it's such a great introduction to boat building and like the practical skills that you need to look after vessels.
Yeah.
I did like it. I mean, I think I'm quite harsh on myself. I tend to think I don't really like boat building. I think I may have mentioned it in the last episode. I find it frustrating. That's probably the main thing. I hate getting things to an exact measurement. Anyway, I won't go on about it. But you guys went on for 3 months.
Yeah, so twice the time you were there, we doubled up. After the joinery and the like traditional rigging and the bits that you stayed for, I assume you did traditional rigging. Did you do like wire work?
I don't think we did wire work, but we did do rope work.
Okay.
splicing and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah, so if you stayed a little bit longer, you ended up actually in the boat shed. We steamed in some planks for some boats. We learned how to take lines if you're replacing planks. I learned an awful lot about painting and varnishing. We made boat hooks. It was more hands-on practical skills than just the initial, this is how you do hand joinery.
We did do some steam bending though.
Yeah, and we did. Did you have Cliffy?
Yeah, I think we did, yeah.
Love him.
Yeah.
Hi, Cliff.
It's just remarkable. If anyone doesn't know what steam bending is, check it out on YouTube because it's quite fucking weird. You've never looked at something so solid become so flexible in your life. And it's beautiful because it's a very, very old way of boat building.
Yeah.
It's just been used for hundreds of years and it's ingenious and it's still used.
Yeah.
That was great fun. And I enjoyed making my mallet. I went on and made an oilstone box.
The International Boatbuilding College, all of this experience was so amazing. Like, I was so happy to be able to do that. We were basically learning something new like every few days and actually getting to do it. Like, each thing we really got to try our hands at it. The people we met and the atmosphere there, and like, because I didn't catch the bus or anything in, I walked in every morning. It was like a 40-minute walk and I loved the walk. It was a great walk and I just enjoyed the whole thing. Yeah, that was definitely the highlight of it for me. I would do that again in a second.
So I went to Portsmouth, found a little basement studio, walked to work every day. The beautiful thing about NMRN is that it's a big museum. You know, a lot of money goes towards it from the government and the Royal Navy and stuff.
It's a big complex, isn't it? There's a lot of different things there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got so many different vessels to look after. I personally really like sailing vessels and they have everything there.
Yeah.
But the great thing about that museum is it has so many different teams and it's a very, very, that's really rare. So they had the shipwrights and I did a month or two with them. They have a rigging team that was working on HMS Warrior. And so I did some work with them. They have a whole group of conservators who are looking after the collections that the museum has, but also the vessels, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
You have the curators, archives and library, and then you just have like the management team who are kind of doing the project management side of things, which in itself is a whole skill and one which people restoring historic vessels should probably have.
And then there's like the Mary Rose Museum, you've got Victory, you've got Warrior, they've got all sorts of different collections and museums in their own right, including like shops.
Yep. It's one of my favourite museums ever. I think it was one of my first days I was with the shipwrights and I ended up crawling around on the hull of Victory and popping up into little compartments that the public couldn't see.
Yeah.
You know, I was going up HMS Warrior's mast, which is, I don't even know how far up, off the water. It's massive in the mizzen. And we were kind of scraping rust and it's so far up and just looking over Portsmouth. And it was quite early on in the year still, so it was freezing cold and you're kind of slipping and sliding on the deck.
Yeah.
What else did I do? Oh, with the conservators, I cleaned the entire topsail of HMS Victory, which is the largest textile to survive from the period of the Battle of Trafalgar.
Oh wow.
Just really painful. I was on my knees using knee pads with a tiny little hoover and a tiny little brush and I was just sweeping everything that I could find. But that's probably I love that sail if you go visit the topsail because it's just you just see how vast these pieces of canvas were that these people were hauling. So I was really fortunate. I helped with a whole collections move from the Royal Marines Museum. I helped, which meant like packaging them all up safely and in a proper way. I did loads. I was really, really fortunate.
Before COVID, I was sat with a completely different big project. And then after I came back and this is what I was presented with, I was like, oh, okay. Because I had been working with the shipwrights basically right before I was working with the conservators. And one of the shipwrights had talked to me about this mast and how sad it was that it was just sitting here not being displayed and it was just gathering dust. And then I come back and I get to actually conserve it. So that was great. I actually spent so much time conserving that. it took over my life. Like it really did. I even after the traineeship ended, until I went back to Bermuda in December, I kept going back to Portsmouth to keep conserving it.
Interspersed with that was going up to some other museums in the UK. Cutty Sark. I did actually go to the Cutty Sark.
Good.
Yeah.
Were you like, I'm so prepared to work here?
Yeah. Exactly. That was great fun as well. So that's a slightly different setup in the fact that they've got a shipkeeping team.
Yeah.
And then they bring in independent rigging company, TS Rigging. I wasn't actually there, unfortunately, when they were looking after Cutty Sark's rigging, but I helped the shipkeepers with cleaning the ship and went into, once again, like down into the keel, into the depths of the ship, and just noticing the difference between the shape of Cutty Sark and HMS Victory.
Yeah, well, the clipper bow was invented in Scotland, wasn't it? In early 1800s, I think, or late 1700s. So that technology, and when I say technology, I mean like boat shapes. It was just not there in Victory's day.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely different design. So that was fascinating as well. And they were also working in different museums with different objectives. So like the Cutty Sark Museum Cutty Sark was built to transport goods, cargo.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously a lot of the Royal Navy stuff is for the Navy.
Yeah.
So you're looking at completely different setups.
I did get shouted at by the Navy at one point. Someone had given me this little pass, but apparently they didn't like my little pass, so they came out and they're having a go at me and this, that, the next thing. I'm like, listen, mate, I just want to get downstairs and look at your woodworm at the end of the day. Like, I'm not here to cause any damage. I'm hopefully going to try and fix some damage if that's all right.
I also went up to Anstruther to the Fisheries Museum, and that was fantastic as well. Oh my God, I loved it. I was up there with another trainee, Matt, and we did bits and bobs, did a bit of paint scraping, did a load of curator stuff, doing collections, bits and bobs.
They had a fifey up there called Reaper.
They did.
Well, they have a fifey up there called Reaper.
They do.
Were you involved in any work on Reaper?
I wasn't, and unfortunately we'd gone up there at a time that they weren't sailing. So that's a really nice example of museum that has vessels out of the water and is kind of preserved for the fabric, and then vessels working in the water, giving an example of what they would have been like in the time. Anstruther was great. I love the countryside, so I was proper all over that. Yeah, and Matt and I went over to Dundee to Discovery and stuff, and St Andrews as well. So we did a bit of exploring Scotland, which was really nice.
Yeah.
Really interesting history, all of the kind of herring fishing industry on the east coast of Scotland there, and down into the east coast of England.
I do have a few critiques about the traineeship, and anyone that is going on one of a similar type should probably be warned of this kind of thing. And for me, it was definitely due to travel. Obviously, the traineeship was mainly focused kind of south of England. I don't actually think there was anything I mean, you guys call Yorkshire the north, but I don't think there was anything other than down south and then Anstruther. So whenever there was like, oh, let's go to a conference together and let's do this, it was all great, but for those further afield, you're talking like £190 for a last minute flight down to Portsmouth or Exeter or something. Like, my critique being that on £1,000 a month bursary, that pretty much killed me. I was paying rent for a house, travelling to Anstruther every day, doing that all the time, and then you need to go and spend 2 weeks down in Portsmouth. Obviously, my own money management comes into it, but I do believe that to go on a traineeship like this, you need to be in a certain kind of situation. In terms of finances, if money was not a worry, I would have made it along to even more things. And I know there's been a few networking days since both the SHTPs that I've not been able to make, for example, for still the very same reasons. And it did make me feel, I don't know, a little bit of an outcast and that I'm miles away.
I would definitely do it again. I think for me, what was best about it was the fact that I was finally surrounded by people who were interested in the same things that I was interested in. It was just like the sense of community, the sense of meeting people and like already feeling an affinity, a connection with them, and like it just being so easy to like snap together as a group. And just like that part of it, even more than what we were learning, I think that made the traineeship for me. So I think I would just tell people to be open, to just appreciate every experience that they have, and just make the most of it. To just like grab the experiences, make the most of them, because it's not always going to be like the best situation, is it? Like it's not like everything isn't going to be perfect, but if you kind of focus on the positive sides of what you're getting out from it, it still makes it fulfilling.
Is that footsteps I hear?
Yeah, maybe that's Emily with the drinks.
Sorry I'm a bit late with these. Skipper went and threw up at the bow and left me on the tiller for a while, but here are your drinks.
Thank you. I see that's a non-alcoholic beer.
Non-alcoholic. I took a sip just to make sure.
Is that why it's cloudy now? That's
And that is a perfect, neat rum. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That one was easy.
So if the skipper's throwing up at the bow, who's on the helm?
Oh, I just left it for a minute. You know, she's going strong. But I should probably definitely get back up there. We were just coming up to another wind turbine.
Yeah, you do that. Off you go.
That's not a bad beer, actually.
Yeah.
She's doing a pretty good job,
Yeah.
is our Emily. And speaking of trainees not doing a bad job, we've got just about enough phone signal to be joined by Adrian Ragbourne, who's the CEO of Seize Your Future. Welcome. Tell us about your organisation.
Thank you. Well, Adrian Ragbourne from Seize Your Future. Seize Your Future is a youth development charity, originally started back in 2008 as a partnership. The charity has existed since 2012. Primary purpose is to help young people. Sail training is a difficult term to get your head around because we're not teaching people to sail. We're actually offering life skills, the ability for them to recognise the strengths that they have and build their self-confidence, their self-esteem, relationships with others, team working, communication skills, and really give them a purpose in life. Many of the youngsters that we deal with, the vast majority are between 15 and 18. Mm-hmm. They're at that stage in life when often they've been written off by their educational setting or families, or don't have a family or in care, and they're struggling to see what the future holds for them.
Yeah.
So what we like to do is give them a unique environment to bond with others in similar situations or that they can learn from. We have a professional crew always of 7, plus watch leaders, a scientist in residence, a medic, and usually a couple of other experienced volunteers. Many of the youngsters have got no idea of how large the maritime sector is and how broad it is. When you tell them that 95% of what we consume as a world is trafficked across the sea, and that over 80% of the people that work in the maritime sector are actually land-based, they're quite surprised. When you get to talk to them about where do they buy things from, where do their families buy things from, they begin to realise, actually, yes, more so than ever, we live in a kind of throwaway society where we click, we buy, it arrives. When they look to see where it's come from, much of what they consume will have come from overseas, sat on a container on a very large container ship. And it begins to open their eyes to the nature of the sector. Our voyages are typically a week long. We get to go to several places, so they might get to see a large port and see some of those commercial vessels. They might be lucky to go and anchor off of North Wales or the Isle of Man and see two extremes of the sector. So what would have been small fishing villages surviving on families handing over generation after generation to the big ports, where again it was a generational thing. 3, 4, 5 generations worked at the ports. A lot of them don't exist now or have moved out to container ports. So we're educating the youngsters about actually the interest, the excitement, and what a thriving sector it is. You know, bottom line, employability. There's work there for them.
Yeah.
You know, there are not enough youngsters coming into the maritime sector, as you know. And so we can help them. We can help them to get their STCWs. We can help them to get their ENG1. We can give them a training record book and help them to move towards yacht master, or introduce them to organisations that will give them a traineeship or a cadetship.
Yep.
And we're fortunate now to have been doing this for long enough that we've got just a handful of contacts now in the sector. So typically in a year, I will have youngsters that come into us. They then come back and say, this is fantastic, but how do I progress this? So we said, well, come back and we'll give you an opportunity to come and volunteer with us, work on the deck. We'll help them get their STCW, and then I can steer them towards another organisation who would then take them on with the basic credentials, because they know that if we've recommended them, it's because they're reliable, diligent, professional, mature, and will walk onto another vessel and do a good job. We've got examples now where we've got someone that's now on Royalist as a bosun, 2 that are on a yacht in Scotland, and another 2 starting at another boat in Scotland. There's now a good throughput of youngsters that come through our training program and actually move into the sector.
We've done several interviews with trainees that we know that have come through the same process as Hannah and I, and also a couple of trainees who have come from different organisations, different traineeships. So many positive points come out of those interviews, but also one of our trainees mentioned that a negative of a traineeship is sometimes the trainee doesn't know who to turn to if there's an issue. So some of the boats, the trainees are taken on, and then it's almost like, oh yeah, you're part of the crew, you know what you're doing, off you go, you just get on. And then if a problem comes up, sometimes they don't know who to turn to. If the problem itself was with the superior, they don't know who to go to afterwards.
Yeah.
What is the support structure for your trainees on board?
The starting point when they come to us, generally they will have mentors or leaders that come with them. So for that first voyage or first voyages, there are adults there, and that is their task, is to make sure that they're looked after. So that pastoral care role. If they then come back to us, then the support is threefold. We always have a medic on board. So ordinarily they are expedition medics. Often they are senior practicing nurses. So again, they have a lot of pastoral care. They're trained to deal with youngsters and mental health. And their role is to be part of the crew, but looking out proactively. So just looking out for traits, signs within the youngsters that suggest they might be struggling or have any anxiety or any concerns.
Yeah.
They'll then have the person that they're working with. So generally speaking, they'll be the bosun or the bosun's mate. And then they'll have the first officer. And the first officer's responsibility is to make sure that whoever comes on as a trainee is getting the support they need. It's I think I'd be mad to say it's foolproof, because we get all sorts of youngsters, but we are particularly adept at looking at mental health conditions and really looking at the background and appropriateness for that young person. We've got a youngster who's actually now volunteering for a Plymouth-based self-training organisation, because she's been with us 4 or 5 times. She was going to do an engineering degree, then she wanted to do a cadetship, she wanted to come to sea. There are some challenges that she's dealing with, but because she wanted to be based in Plymouth, we found her a role down there that was local to her. But again, she's got a network of support, both from our medic and from one of our team that's based down there. So we'll always try and look after those individuals. But we've also put something else in place. We've launched what's called the network. So this is a virtual support infrastructure for anybody that's interested in the sector. And there'll be regular forums to discuss different topics. But the idea is that it's a support network in place, so that anybody that is looking for help or needing support can have that in place through that network, and not have to rely on, as you say, a team leader, a manager, their boss to do that. And we think that's really important. One of the reasons we identified it was because we work with a lot of cadets, and when the cadets are cadets, they get lots of support, usually from their training organisation, and then bang, they qualify and they're put out into the big bad world, and a lot of them have issues because their first job is on a tanker or a cargo ship in the middle of the Pacific. They get bullied or treated very badly. After their second cycle, they give up. We have a lot coming to us that just don't like the commercial sector, and they don't have a support mechanism in place. So we've talked to some of the cadet programs to get them involved as well, so that we can make sure they've got that support as a serving officer on a commercial vessel, because they're still young and experienced, and the conditions can be very harsh.
Yeah.
So that's part and parcel of what the network was for.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. Will the network support anyone who signs up, or is it just the people coming through the Seize Your Futures programs?
Anyone, and it's broad enough to cover, so we've talked about, obviously our core purpose is sail training, but that very much helps with the maritime careers. But the third strand of what we do is around ocean science, and it's a very important strand for us. Again, we identified that the youngsters coming on board were actually quite inquisitive about the sea. They were hearing a lot about climate change, sustainability, environmental issues, single-use plastics, and they were starting to wonder, what's the problem? Because we look at the sea looks fine. So we started to run some science topics during the voyages, and now we tend to have a scientist in residence on board all through the summer. Some of our voyages science focused, so we'll actually do science every day, and then they'll stop, anchor up somewhere for a couple of days, and actually do a number of experiments and research programs, really helping the youngsters to see for themselves why we have such a big problem. So what is in the sea? Where does it come from? So go up onto land and look at soil traces in the land to see where the chemicals are coming from, see where the plastics are coming from, look at them through one of the microscopes and film it and actually see what's in that content, and then talk about the issue and then what they can do to help. And it has opened a lot of youngsters' eyes into the scale of the problem that we have, and we can share data from all around the world as we go across the Atlantic and talk about different scenarios. So we've got scientists joining the network as well, and young scientists who want to learn more and get involved, and we think that helps everybody. So even those that don't have a particular interest in science per se are excited about what they, as someone going to sea, for example, can do to help, and again, the scale of the problem.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Adrian. We'll be speaking to Adrian again in our next episode. Jess, do you want to go grab that? That sounds like the news coming through.
Oh, yeah. Hang on a second. I'll be back in a minute.
Great, thanks. In the meantime, dear listeners, before I forget, Jess and I were over in Charlestown in Cornwall. Never mind how we got there. You don't need to know the details. Cast that out of your mind. But Jess was doing some sail repair with a friend Tori on Lady Daphne, which is a Thames sailing barge going along for the jollies. Congratulations as she celebrates her centenary since her launch on the 30th of January, 1923. She hosted a couple of events and they had local historians down, and the skipper and the other crew members were there to discuss what she's been up to for the last 100 years, and it has been a lot. So that was really nice to go and have a look on board her. And they do have some more public events coming up, so if you are down in the southwest near Charlestown, then do check that out. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, Jess, you're back.
That was really lovely to speak to Belinda Jocelyn from Women in Boatbuilding.
Oh, great. I love Belinda.
Yes, she's awesome. Did you know that Women in Boatbuilding is a group that she set up on Instagram originally, but they've just received CIC status?
Oh, that's so cool.
That's really cool.
Oh, yes.
So that CIC status will allow them to apply for funding, which they can put towards supporting and encouraging more women into the boatbuilding industry.
Yes.
That's great. It's just what we need. And recently, The Guardian did an article about the complete lack of women in boat building. So it's come at a perfect time. And actually, the Boat Building Academy in Lyme Regis reached out to women in boat building to say, look, can you help us? For the last 3 of their 40-week boat building courses, they'd had no women applying at all.
Really? That's interesting.
Yes, there was something stopping women from finally taking the plunge and applying for that course.
Yeah.
Between them, they've developed a fantastic diversity and inclusion policy.
Great.
They discussed what they could be doing to attract more women. And they've set up a women's bursary.
Cool.
So if one of the barriers to getting on the course was financial, women can apply for the bursary. That's really good news and really, really lovely to see that a company have realised that there's a problem and they've reached out to someone who knows something more than them, and then come up with a solution between them.
That's such a lesson, I think. You know, if you see something's wrong, just go and talk to the people that it actually affects.
Yeah. So yeah, if
That's
you're
great.
interested in boat building, whether you're male or female or anything in between, have a look at the Boat Building Academy in Lyme Regis. Follow Belinda and the crew and their adventure into being a CIC. They are women in boat building. Really positive news stories.
Yeah, that's really nice. And also, just before we finish there, I also just came across some more news, which is really links into our traineeship theme of this week. The Thames Sailing Barge Trust has been awarded £20,000 from Trinity House. So that's a grant awarded to help train Thames Sailing Barge crew, which is great.
That's fab.
So if you want more information on that, just head to the Thames Sailing Barge Trust website and keep an eye on that. So that's great news.
And speaking of Thames sailing barges, didn't Blue Mermaid just get approval from the MCA to carry 100 tonnes?
She did.
Of cargo?
She did, which is excellent. I mean, I think it's really interesting because we should do a whole other episode. Well, we're going to do one on sail cargo, don't you know?
We certainly are. And how much we love it.
But Blue Mermaid, has got this through, which is lovely. And hopefully, it's a really big step in the right direction for UK vessels.
Yeah.
So more to come on that.
Did you mention that we were in Charlestown on Daffers?
Yes.
Cool. And you can follow them. They're on socials at s.b.ladydaphne.
Yeah.
I love that boat.
It's beautiful. What was that? Was that a splash, Jess?
It was a splash. That sounded like a trainee-shaped splash to me.
Jesus. Okay, hang on. I'll go up on deck.
Okay. Sounds like that's all we've got time for today. Follow us on our socials at offwatchpod and our website offwatchpodcast.co.uk. And anyway, fair winds.